Sir, ladies, gents. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Darren Ellison. I'm currently the head of the RAF Medical Services and the chair of the Stewart Memorial Trust. The Stewart Memorial Trust was established in 1969 to honour the life and work of Air Vice Marshal William Stewart, CB, CBE, AFC, who joined the staff of the RAF Physiology Laboratory in 1940 and later commanded the RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine, which the RAF Physiological Laboratory became from 1947 until his death in 1967. The mission of the Trust is to commemorate the work of the late Air Vice Marshal Stewart through the promotion of research and learning in aviation medicine. As such, the Trust both sponsors the Stewart Memorial Lecture, which takes place annually in the Royal Aeronautical Society this evening, as well as offering awards for educational achievements in the sphere of aerospace medicine. If you'd just indulge me for a couple of minutes, I'd just like to pay tribute to the man for who this evening's events are named. William Kilpatrick Stewart graduated from Glasgow University in 1936 with the degrees of BSc and MBCHB with honours. After residencies in medicine and surgery at Glasgow's Western Infirmary, he was awarded a research fellow by the Medical Research Council and carried out research in neurophysiology and neurology. At the outbreak of hostilities in 1939, he joined the RAF Voluntary Reserve, and after a short period at the Central Medical Establishment, he was posted to the RAF Physiological Laboratory under Dr. Sir Brian Matthews. His research focused on those factors which affect the efficiency and safety of aviators. From 1947 until his death in 1967, as previously mentioned, he was head of the RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine. For those of you who don't know much about the military, that is an astonishing tenure in command. His combination of scientific and medical training enabled him to take an active part in wartime research. With an interest in the causes of blackout in aircrew during dogfights, and in the absence of a centrifuge, AVM Stewart conducted many of his experiments in real aircraft, often with himself as the test subject. Amongst other subjects, he also undertook experimental programs on the design and development of better oxygen systems, on the effects of heat and cold, and on decompression sickness. His attributes and success were recognised by the Air Ministry. He was promoted to Group Captain at the age of 37 and Air Commodore at 45, ages which even then were exceptional for an RAF medical officer. The motto on the crest of the RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine, and now on the crest of the RAF Centre of Aerospace Medicine, Ut Securi Volent, expresses the purpose and the achievement of the life of AVM Stewart, that others may fly safely. So not only is this lecture named after AVM Stewart, but as I said, there's also prizes that are awarded in his memory. And I'd like to welcome to join me on stage to present these awards, Mr. Callum Stewart, the son of the late AVM Stewart. Callum? So firstly, the Stewart Memorial Prize, which is awarded to the student on the course of the Diploma in Aviation Medicine who's awarded the highest academic result in the Faculty of Occupational Medicine Diploma in Aviation Medicine exam. It gives me great pleasure to announce that this year's winner of the Stewart Memorial Prize is Wing Commander Tom Bennett-Britton. In addition to the Stewart Memorial Prize, the Trust also offers a prize of the Stewart Award. This award is presented to the RAF Medical Cadet or University Air Squadron member who submits an abstract of note in a significant aerospace medicine topic deemed to be the most worthy by the deciding board. For 2025, this award is presented to Pilot Officer Jess Gamble. Thanks, Colin. So that concludes the award of prizes, and at this point I'd like to hand over to Dr. Camilla Bilger, who's from Martin Baker, who've kindly sponsored this evening's event, to introduce the Stewart Lecture. Camille.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, The Martin Baker connection to the RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine started in the 1940s, when its commanding officer, William Stewart, provided Sir James Martin with aeromedical expertise on the development of the ejection seat, and in particular, the ejection handle and face blind to be human accommodating in preventing head-forward flexion upon upward acceleration, which Air Vice Marshal Stewart himself tested in 1945 on our 65-foot tower. It gives me great pleasure to think that this legacy continues to this day, whereby in the work Martin Baker does every day, providing for aircrew physiological safety, may it be in biomechanics, in-flight human performance, or life support equipment integration, we still work almost daily, hand in hand, with the medical officers that make up RAF CAM in Henlo. I want to believe that both Sir James Martin and Air Vice Marshal Bill Stewart are proud looking upon us. Professor Newman, David, you have been instrumental in your aeromedical military career and then academic career, from fast jet ejection medical reviews to G-induced physiological and biomechanical responses, topics topical for our generation of researchers, engineers, doctors, and aeromedical experts who are working towards the next generation of combat aircraft. I hope to speak tonight on behalf of this aeromedical generation, in that we hope to put to good use the knowledge you have helped disseminate with so much passion and thoroughness over the last decades, as an academic, but also in your capacity as editor-in-chief of the Blue Journal. May I, on behalf of the directors of Martin Baker, offer you our congratulations on this well-deserved award tonight.
Thank you, Camille. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour to be here tonight to deliver the 2025 Stewart Memorial Lecture. So thank you to the Stewart Trust for inviting me and making all the necessary arrangements, because I haven't come from a local destination. So tonight's topic is Fast Jet Aviation Medicine, and this topic has been the focus of my professional career for a very long time. I was looking at the dates before, it's well over 30 years. But I'm still passionate about it. It's a great area of interest to me. Now, this is a big topic. I've only got a certain amount of time, and I'm conscious of the time. I don't want to keep you here too long. It should only be 3 or 4 hours, then we should be done. So I'm going to cover these main objectives, which you can see there, and each one of those is not going to be an exhaustive overview of the topic. I'm going to assume that a lot of you are aviation medicine qualified, and I can assume a lot of it is as read. So when we talk about G physiology, for instance, that's not a lecture on G, it's just a couple of extra things that I thought might be of interest. So the first thing to talk about, though, is what exactly is a fast jet? Now, it would seem to be intuitive and obvious as to what a fast jet is, but that's not always the case, depending on the audience. I think most of you pretty much understand that. The way I like to describe it to non-knowledgeable people, 1 or 2 seats in a small-ish military aircraft powered by 1 or 2 jet engines with a weapons platform attached to it, with the sole purpose, really, of the mission being lethal application of violence against an enemy target. That's one way to describe it. Another way to look at it is having a look at the roles that a fast jet performs. Many of you will be familiar with these. Fighter aircraft, basically their main mission is to achieve air superiority in a battle space environment via these sorts of missions, and that generally involves successful prosecution of air combat, and it's a high risk, a high reward environment. The attack environment is, as the picture shows, basically not quite a bomber, but applying munitions to ground-based targets. close air support in defensive troops that are close to a frontline environment, need some support from the air, and air interdiction missions with suppression of enemy air defences. But you've also got trainer jets, like the Hawk, for instance, because you have to train people on how to fly these aeroplanes, so lead-in fighter training done with this sort of platform is used for that. But you can also put a light strike weapons package on them, so they can be used in that sense as well. But in the modern environment, you tend to have multi-role aircraft that can pretty much do the fighter and the attack mode all at once, and that's increasingly common. So what's also important to have a look at is how quickly fast jets have evolved from the early days to the platforms that we use now. So it's worth having a look at at that history. Generation 1, I mean, people talk about generations of fighter aircraft. Generation 1 were obviously the early jet engine fighters. Some of these emerged during the latter part of the Second World War, like the ME-262. They've got the P-80 Shooting Star here. And they were pretty much where jet engine fighter technology started. They were pretty basic and pretty rudimentary, but a significant step up from a propeller-driven aeroplane. Generation 2, a step up in capability with the wing being swept, which changes the aerodynamic manoeuvrability of the aeroplane. The adoption of infrared missiles and now a radar system as well. Gen 3 allowed us to go supersonic, and that also was a game-changing technology. And then you couple that with enhanced radar systems and beyond visual range missiles, and you've got a very capable interceptor. Gen 4 is pretty much the typical fighter aircraft that you see, fast jet aircraft that you see in most countries. They're enhanced manoeuvrability, they've got much better radar systems. The missiles are now much more advanced. You've got a hands-on throttle and stick system, which is important when you're trying to operate aircraft systems under a high G environment, and the adoption of the head-up display. And I've spent quite a bit of time in Gen 4 aircraft, as you'll hear later, and quite a capable aeroplane. Gen 4 Plus, we couldn't just go chronologically, we had to interfere with this system and not go straight to 5. So Gen 4 Plus, or Gen 4.5 as some people call it, not quite Gen 5, but better than Gen 4. They were sort of significant upgrades to existing platforms or newer platforms like the Typhoon, had greater agility than previous generations, much better sensor systems, and the early precursor to stealth technology with reduced radar cross-sections to make them less detectable by the enemy. And then finally we get to Gen 5, which is very popular at the moment. Everyone wants a Gen 5 jet. Very capable aeroplanes. All aspects stealth technology. They've got internal weapons carriage, so you don't just bolt the missile or the bomb on the outside of the aeroplane, it's carried internally. That helps with the stealth arrangement. They're increasingly super agile, and what that means is that the pilot has full control authority at high angles of attack in the post-store region of the manoeuvring envelope of the aeroplane. And no doubt you've seen air shows where aircraft like the F-22 will do some amazing manoeuvres. Previous generations couldn't do that. Very digital, particularly with the avionics system. Sensor fusion now, so we take information from different sensors, fuse it and present a single image to the pilot. Data linkage as well, and a super cruise capability. So that means they can fly at supersonic speeds without the afterburner, which is obviously better for fuel consumption, keeps your carbon emissions down, which is not a high priority in this environment, to be fair. Right? And also gives less heat emission for the aeroplane, so it's harder for the enemy with their heat-seeking missiles to detect. So the F-35 and the F-22 are pretty much the state-of-the-art when it comes to Gen 5 aeroplanes. And many countries, including the UK and Australia, where I come from, operate the F-35 in one of its 3 different variants. So that's a quick history on fast jet evolution. That all took place in about 80 years, so it's quite significant. So what does fast jet operations look like? These aeroplanes, and I'm talking about the modern fast jets, a significant flight envelope from sea level to however high you want to go almost, and I've been to 50,000 feet in an F-18, but some of these airplanes will go a bit higher. Very high speed capable, you know, supersonic, Mach 1 point something. Some of them will do Mach 2, which is getting close to fast enough. Very complex force environment, particularly with the super agile element to it. So lots of high G, but in several axes, not just GZ, but often GX and GY as well, particularly GY. If you're doing a high alpha velocity vector roll, you'll get a lot of sideways G in that, which is something the pilot has to contend with. As I mentioned, they're multi-role now, so the aircraft can, with very simple switching in the cockpit, can switch from air-to-air to air-to-ground mode and engage a wider range of targets than if it was purely an air-to-air aircraft. We've got helmet-mounted displays, which increase the situational awareness for the pilot, but also come with their own issues. And we're now, of course, bolting more and more stuff onto the head of the pilot, using the pilot as a mounting platform for equipment, which in turn has its own issues with G-induced neck injuries and things like that. We've got information management and workload issues. The amount of information you have to manage as a fast jet pilot in the modern era is extreme. You have to prosecute the tactical situation with choosing the correct weapons at the correct time for the correct target, and then you have to manoeuvre the aeroplane in to achieve an effective firing solution on the enemy. You have to do all of that while sustaining high G potentially. You have to maintain situational awareness of what's going on around you. And you also have to, you've got to wear all this life support equipment as well, which, you know, adds to the complexity of everything. But the information management is quite significant. You also have to fly the aeroplane, and you have to keep an eye on the fuel state of the aeroplane and, of course, the energy state of the aircraft as well. You can't afford to get slow in one of these if you're in an air combat engagement. So I mentioned the life support equipment, and you can see in the picture here just how much life support equipment you physically have to wear out to the aeroplane. And it's there for a reason, of course. And if all of that goes wrong, you may have to eject from the aeroplane and then worry about the post-landing survival situation, which may not be in a friendly area. So there's a lot to contend with. Right, now these are not fast jets, but I'm going to digress a little bit and tell you about how I got into this environment. I'm not a military pilot, I'm an enthusiastic amateur, but I'm a civilian pilot with a range of experience in different civilian aeroplanes. But my first posting in the Air Force as an Air Force doctor was to our primary flight training squadron, which was a gift to me. I had a civilian doctor working there, and I basically said, well, you can do the doctoring because I'm going down the road to the flight training squadron, and that's what I'm going to do all day. So I was doing my private pilot license training on the weekends and having all this military flying during the week as a consolidation exercise. So I got my tax money back that year. Not long after that, I got sent to do a course that the Air Force had introduced for medical officers to familiarise themselves with the flight environment, which was another gift. So it was a week of dedicated flying in PC-9s. That's all we did, just fly around PC-9s with an instructor, hands-on flying. That's fantastic fun. But then I got sent to Williamtown, which some of you may have been there. It's about an hour and a half's drive from Sydney. On the coast. I mean, we know where to put our flying bases. There's a beach that goes thousands of miles left and right of the base. All right? The weather's always perfect, except when it's not. That's a beautiful place. And so the Air Force decided to base the tactical fighter group there with 3 squadrons of F-18s, 2 frontline ones and an operational conversion unit, and a lead-in fighter training squadron with the Mackie, which I'll show you in a minute, with a small element for forward air control using PC-9s, camouflaged, armed up PC-9s, which were a lot of fun. All of this is gone now. The tactical fighter group has a new name. I don't know what it is. The F-18s are all gone. They started being called classics, and you know you're getting old when the aeroplane you were used to flying is called a classic. Anyway, replaced by the F-35, and the Mackie's been replaced by the Hawk 127, and the PC-9's gone to the PC-21. But same squadrons, just operating different platforms. So F-18 here, fantastic aeroplane. So I turned up on the base. I didn't know anyone. And I think it was the second day I was there, I went down to the lead-in fighter training squadron for the morning briefing. I thought I'd go down there. Met some of the pilots, met the commanding officer who decided I was going to be the squadron doctor. And I said, yes, that's a good idea, sir. And the next day, I had my first ride in a fast jet. Now, the rest of the doctors at the base wondered how I did that, because some of them had been there for years and had never been in one. The difference is, and I guess this is for the younger people in the audience, you have to leave the medical centre to go to where the pilots are if you want to go flying. I learnt that real fast, right? If you sit in the medical centre waiting for a pilot to come to you to say, I need to take you flying, that's not going to happen, right? So you have to go down there. So had my first flight on that particular day. That's not the day in question. My second flight was the next day, and this theme continued for the next 3 years. Basically didn't do much doctoring, really, if I'm honest. If my boss at the time is watching, none of this happened. None of this happened. Anyway, so this is the Macchi jet, which is an Italian single-engine, two-seat trainer jet, which we used for jet conversion and lead-in fighter training. Also had some light strike capability when needed. Fantastic fun to fly, really nice, stable aeroplane. Could do quite a bit of G in that thing. It was getting old when I got there. They had another, I think, 10 or so years, and then they got replaced by the Hawk. But fantastic fun to fly. And here's some photos I took during some of the missions. Now, the first couple of flights I had, this is probably similar to those in the audience who've had a fast jet ride. You are a passenger only, and they may let you have a bit of a fly, but it's designed to show you what it's like to fly in them. Because I was already a trained pilot, a civilian pilot, and I could obviously, I guess, show I knew how to basically fly an aeroplane in general, I very quickly got trained up in how to fly these properly, all unofficially. So I knew all the checks and all the procedures. I had my own equipment issued. I had my own helmet, my own G-suit, my own life support vest, all hanging on a peg in the flight line building with all the other pilots. It had my nickname on it, Doc, not much imagination involved. I didn't choose that one, though. It was assigned to me, but I wanted something a bit cooler, but that's it. Didn't get that. So I basically became another pilot in the squadron, unofficially, and I was second set of eyes. I used to fly quite a bit of the mission. Some of the missions I flew from start to finish. I've done formation takeoffs in these things. Most of the things you can do in these jets I had a go at, and just fantastic fun, I have to say. Top picture shows us heading out to the weapons range with small practice bombs to make a small puff of smoke on the ground to show where the real bomb would have gone. That's a bit of fun. Some air combat, flying out to some air combat flying, which is amazing fun if you like that sort of thing, as long as no one's actually shooting back at you, I guess. It was fantastic fun. And this is a formation fly past we did for Australia Day, which the military does a bit of. Fleet support to the Navy. This is the Navy here, Australian Navy. We've only got one. That's unkind, I know. So rather than actually shooting sea skimming missiles at the Navy made us pretend to be those missiles, which is fantastic fun because all we had to do is get right down on the water and fly as fast as possible at the ship, and then at the last minute climb over the ship to not actually fly into it, and just did that until we ran out of fuel. Not entirely out of fuel, we had to go back and, you know what I mean. So this is fantastic fun doing stuff like that. And this is the end of the flight past we did on Australia Day, the Sydney Harbour Bridge there, iconic bridge. That's close formation. There's actually 4 jets in this formation, but I can't capture them all. But yeah, fantastic fun doing this. Right, so F-18s that were on the base there. So I had quite a few hours in these things, flying them around. Again, doing the takeoffs, landings, and some of the mission stuff. The pilots were always very keen to show what the jet can do. Right? So one of my first flights, the instructor pilot said to me, "What do you want to do in this jet?" And I said, "I've always wanted to fly supersonic myself, right? Fly through the sound barrier myself." So he said, "Right, handing over." So I did that, and I have to say, It's actually quite disappointing. Nothing happens. In an advanced jet like the F-18, computer controlled, it smooths everything out. Nothing much changes. Just a number on the head-up display changes. Anyway, so here's a few pictures of me doing this sort of work. Now, of course, the flying that I did was absolutely epic, particularly when I did a staff senior fighter pilot instructor 1v1 mission where they just went out where the rules of engagement are really narrowed. The only rule being basically don't actually shoot each other. And that's absolutely intense sort of flying. But while the flying was epic, it was more about, not just having a good time, but understanding the risks that the pilots that I was responsible for were experiencing and having to deal with every day. And for me, as an AvMed doctor supporting them, to actually go and share those risks with them as often as I could. And that certainly makes a difference to how the pilots perceive the doctor if the doctor's willing to share the risk. And the risks are many, and we'll come to that in a little while. So in preparation for this talk, I was looking through my logbook and I found a typical month of flying. And you can see there, I should have been doing doctoring stuff at that point, but anyway. Not all of it went well. That was a near mid-air collision that we had. That was actually much closer than I've written down there. Yeah, we had to take avoiding action. So there's bombing, there's 1v1 BFM, supersonic stuff, some NAVs. Typical month in the life of a squadron doctor. When you've got 4 squadrons to choose from, you fly with them all, right? Sometimes on the same day, right? In the afternoon, and then back for some nighttime flying, right? Because it's 24/7, right? Why not? Anyway. Right, so then I got sent to the UK to do the diploma course, right? So we have some diploma students here, so good to see you all here. After the diploma course, there's an advanced operational aerospace medicine course. I think it's called something else now, but you get to do some advanced military stuff, including flying in a Hawk, which is pretty cool. Some of you in the audience may recognise Terry here, Terry Adcock, the pilot here. He was my pilot. He's a great guy to fly with, and he knew the sort of flying I'd done, so he basically let me do the flying, which is fantastic, because we ended up in Cornwall somewhere at 200 feet doing 450 knots with him just hoping I didn't get any lower than that. This all came to an end when we hit a bird, had to make an emergency diversion into Yeovilton, so that was the way I got to visit the Yeovilton Navy base. Then when we landed back at Boscombe Down, one of the main tyres blew up, and so we decided that maybe we just stop. That's enough action for one day. So then I got sent to North Luffenham at the AMTC, which was great fun. It's a great job instructing pilots in AvMed areas. And when I got there, some of the doctors said, "What do you want to do while you're up here?" And I said, "Well, RAF Wittring's just down the road. I would love to have a fly in a Harrier." And they said, "You'll never do that. That's absolutely impossible. None of us have ever done that. Yeah, that will never happen." Well, I was a bit disappointed because I thought that would have been a great thing. But they said, "No, categorically, never happen." So a few weeks later, after flying in a Harrier T10, which the pilot again let me do most of the flying in that, again at low level across the UK, fantastic fun as a fantastic jet. So that was good to do that. Right, enough about that. Let's get on to some more academic issues. Let's quickly have a look at the Fast Jet G environment. So as part of my PhD research that I did on G, I was able to download the G data from F-18s after some of the missions that we flew. And this is a typical 1v1 air combat manoeuvring engagement that we flew. Of course, every one of these spikes here is trying to render us unconscious due to the G, right? And what you can't see is how many individual spikes are in here. These are all individual engagements. This one was quite a protracted one here. And if we expand that, this is what happened, right? So a set-up turn, fights on, and we're offensive, which is a nice way of saying we're doing the chasing, right? The other guy is defensive. That wasn't a character assessment, that's just what we were doing. So we're trying to get the nose of the aircraft into the right spot for the missile that we're carrying, and we can't quite get it, but eventually we achieve a firing solution, hold it, he's dead, and then back off, set up for the next one. So all of this is happening in about 100 seconds. It's very dynamic, highly intense, Now, what you don't notice from air shows when you watch these jets flying around is how violent it is inside the aeroplane. They vibrate and they shudder. It's quite violent. And when you're doing all of this sort of manoeuvring, it's intense, physically violent to experience, but it doesn't stop you smiling while you're doing it. Right, all of you know this, so we won't spend a lot of time on this. The human body in upright situation is at the mercy of G. You know, we are not fundamentally designed to cope with more than 1 G, and the big battle we have is trying to defend our cerebral perfusion against high levels of G. We're just not able to do that. Now, of course, we've got a heart to brain distance of round about that. Right? Heart here, brain up here. If you're a giraffe, right, you have your heart basically halfway up your body and the brain another half away. So the G tolerance for a giraffe is around 2. And that's why you never see a giraffe flying a fast jet. Who knew? Now, we don't, as a physiological thing, don't sit there and just absorb the G. We try and defend our cerebral perfusion. So the barrel reflex mechanisms kick in. And that eventually drives blood pressure up to where it's a bit better protected. However, it takes a while to get that done, right? 6 to 12 seconds roughly. But you know, in a modern fast jet, if you want to go from 1G to 9G, that can be done at 15G per second. So half a second and you're at 9G, where your body is trying to keep you. It's going to take another 10 seconds to help. Now, just to remind you about some of this, if you plot G versus time, you get basically this curve, which is the border between being conscious and unconscious, depending on how much time you're exposed to different amounts of G. If you then put the barrel reflex curve in, all right, so your G versus time changes as the barrel reflex kicks in a bit better, you end up with this curve. And then, depending on the rate of application of the G, you get visual symptoms at low onset rates, I'm sure this is familiar to you, and no visual symptoms at high onset rates. So, blackout and grey out will be familiar to you all, I'm sure. If we clean this up now, then we've got the typical G-time tolerance curve that all of you are familiar with, I'm sure. And this represents the minimum G tolerance point. We're going to come back to this slide a little bit later. So this increase in your G tolerance here is a function of your barrel reflexes finally getting engaged and working and driving your blood pressure up and protecting your cerebral perfusion. Now, G tolerance itself is multifactorial. Many things determine your G tolerance on a given day. And a single pilot can have a good day and a bad day in G tolerance terms with no apparent reason for that. That's just a thing that happens. Now, regular exposure to G is beneficial for you for reasons we'll talk about in a minute. Absence is not. And that's a challenge when we're starting to use more synthetic flight training for fast jet pilots. Right? They're not getting as much G time as they might otherwise have got. So that's not particularly beneficial to them. Now, we do know that there's anecdotal evidence, this is going back in time before I did my PhD, that fast jet pilots will adapt to regular exposure to G. Right? So if they're doing it a lot, their G tolerance will go up. And when I started flying in fast jets, I noticed this myself. Right? 6G started feeling like 4G. It just got easier to deal with. I didn't have to do a G strain much at all. In fact, most of the pilots would titrate their G strain just enough. They do just enough of it to achieve the result they needed. And the more I flew, the better my G tolerance became. So, and the opposite applies as well. If you stop flying, you lose this effect. It's not a permanent thing. It's a training effect. Most dangerous flight of the year for a fast jet pilot is the first one after an extended break from flying. Typically, in my country, it's over the summer holidays over Christmas. They might not fly for 5 or 6 weeks. And one of the pilots once told me he came back after that period of time, got in a jet, and thought, I need to get my G tolerance up as quickly as possible. So he went out by himself and did a max performance handling trip in the F-18 and ended up unconscious. So I figured it turned out well because he's telling me the story. And he said he woke up and he couldn't believe how quickly the ground was coming up towards him, and he managed to pull out just in time at the end of that. Of course, he never told anyone about that. That's an issue in itself. But that was a function of his G tolerance being the worst it was going to be that year. So, this was interesting to me, so I decided I'd do some research on this, and my PhD came out of that. My supervisor, Robin Callister, professor at Newcastle University, she wasn't a professor back then. I was her first PhD student, and now she's a professor. Obviously, other things happened in between that. I wasn't purely responsible for that. Right? But Robin was a fantastic supervisor. Hopefully she's going to be watching the recording of this later. But it was still, pay some tribute to her for helping me get through all this. It's no small thing doing a PhD. She's a fantastic physiologist, great mentor, friend and colleague. So we did a series of experiments. I didn't have a centrifuge. I mean, I talked to Nick Green about this many, many times over many years. I never had a centrifuge, not even an old one. So I'd use a tilt table to give people sudden exposure to 1G. It's not as dramatic as I'm making it sound. But we used a group of pilots versus a control group of non-pilots, and we also tested the same pilots in a separate experiment before and after a period of high G flying. The theory being that we would see an adaptation in those pilots over time as a function of enhanced barrel reflex function. Pretty much the same but in opposite direction to what happens to astronauts when they go into space, where the barrel reflex turns off because there's no challenge, no G challenge for them to do anything about. So that was the theory. Now I'm paraphrasing like a lot of work into a couple of minutes here, but you'll notice, so we're lying them prone on a tilt table, and then without any warning we suddenly rotate it up, so they're going from supine to 1G, right? And the non-pilot group would pretty much show the typical response you would see, right? Blood pressure goes up and then it drops, right? It goes up initially due to an increase in heart rate, right? But then G, even 1G, right? And then relax. They're not doing any muscle straining or anything like that. Blood pressure drops, barrel reflex kicks in, and they eventually recover. But you give a 1G challenge to a fully G-adapted fighter pilot, and they just laugh at you. Right? There's a little initial response. It's almost like the barrel reflex saying, "Oh, is G coming? Oh, it's only 1. Okay, forget about that." Right? Literally nothing changes, which was, that was a significant result. Heart rate in the non-pilots would all just go out of control for a handful of seconds. The fighter pilot would boost it and then just let it come back down again. Job done. It's only 1G. I'm used to 7.5. This is not a challenge. If we compared the non-pilots with the pilot group, the pilots here in the black columns here, statistically significant changes in systolic pressure, diastolic pressure, mean arterial pressure, that's the important one, and pulse pressure. Pulse pressure is maintained in the pilot group. The non-pilots just lose their pulse pressure for a little bit, right? Heart rate was pretty similar between them, but the big effect is in blood pressure control. And if you look here at some of the things that contribute to blood pressure, stroke volume is better protected in the pilot group, and total peripheral resistance is better protected in the pilot group. Not significant statistically, but that's helped keeping mean arterial pressure as a response much higher than the non-pilot group. So there's definitely a training effect going on there. And to confirm that, tested a group of fighter pilots on the head-up tilt table after they had no flying exposure to high G for a minimum of 5 weeks. And they actually exhibited the standard non-pilot response. All that adaptation disappears over the summer period. And then we tested them again after a period of high G flying, and it was quite a noticeable difference, right? Big increases in resting or pre-tilt mean arterial pressure, big increase in post-tilt mean arterial pressure, and a big increase in heart rate. So there's a G training effect going on with the barrel reflex, induced by their repetitive occupational exposure to lots of G, which makes sense because this is what you want. You want a training effect here. And if we come back to this curve, what's basically happening is that the adapted barrel reflexes are shifting the G tolerance limits upwards. This is not a perfect representation. It's a stylistic impression, if you like. because we don't exactly know how this works yet. But certainly this is what's happening. And then if they stop flying, this just trends back to its baseline normal level, the one that we're physiologically built for. Now, let's talk about G protection briefly. There's a whole bunch of things you can do as a fast jet pilot to protect your exposure to G. There are a lot of stresses that we know about that lower G tolerance, so basically don't do any of those. It's pretty straightforward. Do this often, as we've talked about. The muscle tensing, the anti-G straining manoeuvre, there's several versions of that, and I know most of you are fully aware of all of that. That's actually quite protective if you do it properly. Full maximum G strain will give you that much protection, but if you're only going to 6G, you don't need to do a 9G level anti-G straining manoeuvre. It's just fatiguing if you do it properly. Wearing a G suit, that gives you quite a bit of protection, and positive pressure breathing, and also we now have in some aircraft an auto GCAS system, an automatic ground collision avoidance system. That basically interrogates, it's a system on board the aeroplane that pretty much works out whether the pilot's paying attention or not. We'll give the pilot a certain amount of time to recover the aeroplane. And if the pilot doesn't do that in the time that the computer thinks is enough, the computer will literally take over the aircraft. The head-up display will show a fly-up indicator, and these two, this is shown as a cross here, but really think about it as two chevrons that are approaching each other, and when they meet in the middle, they form a cross. At that point, the fly-up indicator turns the whole thing into an actual fly-up manoeuvre. Aircraft will roll level and pull up and fly away from the ground all by itself. And that's saved quite a few pilots. Right? Now, it gives the pilot, if he or she is conscious and alert and doing this deliberately, right, the option to recover the aeroplane before the aircraft does it itself by giving them these head-up display indicators. Right? They can take over at that point. If they fail to do so, then the automatic system will protect the aircraft and the pilot as a secondary element. I mean, the system's designed to protect the aeroplane so someone else can use it. If the pilot survives that as well, that's a bonus. But it has saved quite a few pilots around the world using this system. Now, the G suit is not a new thing. It hasn't really evolved a lot over the years. The Poppin belt, some of you may be familiar with that, back in the 1930s in the US. It was simply an abdominal belt. I mean, imagine doing this. You're about to do high G combat manoeuvre, and you have to manually inflate your own abdominal belt to protect you before you do the manoeuvre. And if you want to change your mind, well, you've got to, I guess, uninflate it. Cumbersome, didn't really help much, but it was a precursor to some more advanced suits. Basically, there's two old suits that we talk about. There's the Frank suit and the cotton suit. There it is, cotton suit. Obviously, I'm biased. I think that's a good suit. Comes from Australia, because we buy them from somewhere else now. But anyway, the difference between the two, the Canadian Frank suit, named after Franks who thought of this, it was a fluid-filled suit. It offered apparently pretty good G protection, but it was heavy, cumbersome, bulky, and not ideally what you want. The cotton suit, named after Professor Frank Cotton, who's a physiology professor at the University of Sydney, was an air-filled suit, which is pretty much what we use today. Right? I mean, I'll show you in a minute what it looked like. You wouldn't want to be using it today. The more modern one, as shown here, is a much sleeker, efficient version of the cotton suit. But the inflatable suit is the one we use regularly today. I've spent a lot of time in G suits under high G. If you wear them properly, they are uncomfortable, but they certainly help. So, listen, I want to talk a little bit about the history of testing the G suit in Australia, because imagine doing this sort of testing now. So, this is in the late part of the Second World War. The cotton anti-G suit was prototyped, and here it is. You can see it being worn. The boots were later removed because they were really cumbersome, apparently. So this is Flight Lieutenant Kenneth Robertson, who's a test pilot, and his job was to test this suit out. He had a team of pilots working with him, but he was a heavily decorated pilot, actually. Won the Air Force Cross twice for his work on testing G suits. and the Distinguished Flying Cross for operations in combat, flying Lincoln bombers. So quite a remarkable pilot. And as a side note, I actually looked up his service records on the National Archive in Australia. An amazing fellow, man after my own heart. In his annual performance reports as a staff officer, when he stopped flying, they never critiqued his piloting ability because that was clearly well known, but his admin abilities were not up to par, many of his senior officers said. In fact, one of them said something like, "I'm astonished that an officer of this level has such little regard for administrative tasks." So, kind of like that. Anyway, they were using a Hurricane and a Spitfire, a couple of them, to test the G suit out. And what they basically did was they took unprotected pilots out against other pilots who were wearing the suit, and it was just air combat. And imagine putting that through an ethics committee these days. You know? I mean, that's a high-risk study, right? And I don't know how many of them lost consciousness because the ones that were protected were always winning, and they could go to much higher levels of G. So anyway, that's what we used to do back in the day. Now, one of the pilots involved was a RAF pilot, and he made this very notable comment. He thought the cotton anti-G suit was the most notable advance in aviation that the Second World War produced. In fact, he went on to say that the aircraft was then going to become the limiting factor, which we now know is not the case. But at the time, the pilots could almost sustain more G than the aeroplane. And, protection up to 9G was demonstrated. This is back in the, early 1940s. And I like this bit here. Imagine there's 4 Spitfires are out there, the pilot's pulling all this G, no problems at all, absolutely no ill effects, looks out of the cockpit and sees bent wings. That would terrify me as a pilot, see the wing flexing when it shouldn't. But they just remarked on this. We brought back the airplane, it's pretty bent due to the G, but the suit worked really well. So, I mean, that's the ultimate test, isn't it? The pilot survives, the aircraft doesn't. So, anyway. I don't think you could do that sort of testing now. Right, now if you want to read more of this, I encourage you to read a paper that was published in the journal that I'm now the editor-in-chief of, on the development of the Australian anti-G suit, where I got some of this information from, written by dear friend and colleague Wilf Brooke, who sadly is no longer with us, passed away in 2018. And I want to pay tribute to Wilf. There are people in your life that have a direct influence on where your life ends up going, right? And most of you could probably work out there's 2 or 3 people in your life that if you hadn't met them and had their influence on you, your life could have been quite different. And Wilf was one of those people for me. He was my anatomy lecturer at medical school, and I heard that he was in the Air Force Reserves, and I was quite keen on joining the Air Force. So I went to talk to him in his office. Now, his office was a typical academic office. I mean, you had to fight your way in through all the books and paraphernalia. But there was a picture on his wall, this one, which I've never forgotten. Right? Had a big impact. That's the only thing I saw in his office, really, other than him. Right? I saw that picture and thought, yeah, I definitely want to do this as a job. Right? That's aviation medicine in a nutshell, in a humorous sort of way. But thanks to Wilf, my life and professional career moved on in a particular direction, which I'm forever grateful for. And he would have loved to have been here tonight to listen to this, but sadly he's not. But anyway, I couldn't do this lecture without mentioning him and his contribution. Right, so we're getting to the end, so it's nearly time to eject out of here. So let's talk about ejection. A bit of a segue. I never got to eject from an aeroplane. I mean, on 3 occasions I thought I was going to have to. One in particular, when the aircraft I was in at altitude, we're at 25,000 or 30,000 feet doing a post-maintenance test flight. I mean, the pilot calls him up and says, "Hey Doc, you want to go on a test flight?" I said, "Sure," because that's the standard response, always. "Yes, I'll do that." And it didn't go according to plan, and the aircraft, for whatever reason, just departed controlled flight. And we just fell out of the sky, completely out of control. It's the most physically violent thing that's ever happened to me. And we were falling down literally like a stone, past trying to recover the aeroplane. We're inverted, spinning at a high rate, and it was a beautiful day, as I remember. And passing 15,000 feet, I thought, right, so today is not going to turn out the way I thought, and I'm going to eject very soon probably, because it was a 10,000 foot decision. If you're out of control, you eject. So it's not that easy to do while you're inverted, being thrown around the cockpit. Tightened all the straps, assumed the position, the correct ejection posture, hand on the handle, and I was just waiting for the call. I was well prepared for it. Anyway, it didn't get to happen. The pilot recovered it just in time, so I would have got a nice tie and all that. Ejection has always been of interest to me. In fact, my very first ever published research paper was on the ejection history of the Australian Air Force, and that was 30 years ago, a bit over 30 years ago. My first entry in that journal, which I'm now the editor-in-chief of. So, interesting. When I was doing that research, a very senior officer in the medical branch of the Australian Air Force said to me, now, if we know you're interested in ejection, if you ever eject, we're going to think you did that deliberately. So when we were falling out of the sky, that thought went through my head, and I thought, oh, he's gonna blame me for this, but looks like I'm going to have to do it. But anyway, I didn't. Now, ejection seats have been around for a little while, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. The first ejection in an emergency was in 1942, so there were some wartime ejections. So the Swedes were involved in developing ejection seats. I mean, the development of the ejection seat pretty much came about because we had high-performance aeroplanes and we needed some assistance to get the pilots out in an emergency, particularly in a combat setting. So Martin Baker turned up, and of course, most of you know about Bernard Lynch. I mean, I don't know how quite they did that from the ethics committee point of view. We're going to get one of our staff, and he's going to test it for us, right? And I don't remember how many he did, but he did quite a few ejections actually. Anyway, the first real one, if you like, Joe Lancaster. And here are the two of them here. Bernard Lynch, Joe Lancaster. He ejected out one of these things, an Armstrong Whitworth 52. It was a test pilot. Here's Bernard Lynch leaving the famous Gloucester Meteor there. So, absolute history right there. Now, just a quick reminder, there's a lot of G involved in an ejection. We're talking, 14 to 16 G at about 180 to 200 odd G per second. That's well inside the tolerance limits, which is good, but it's still a violent activity, but it's better than not doing it. Injuries are not uncommon, and a lot of those are due to circumstances at the time. And if you eject out of a totally out of control aeroplane, you're more likely to get injured. Just because it's a highly dynamic and evolving situation. But if you're in a nice, calm, controlled ejection, you can pretty much get away with it in a modern seat with virtually no injuries. And the ejection survival rate, if you look at all the published studies over the years, is well in excess of 90%. If you look at modern seats, it's very high, 90% range. So that's, it's a brilliant invention. I've had to update this slide a couple of times before I finally got here tonight because people keep doing this around the world. And it may have actually changed since I did this, I'm not sure. But that's a lot of lives that Martin Baker have saved. And some of those are colleagues of mine who've ejected. And I know one guy is another friend, colleague, test pilot, who's done it twice. He ejected from a Mirage twice. I've had to explain that to a few people in the past, not from the same Mirage. Once you've ejected, you can't get back in and do it again, right? So, two separate occasions, separated by some years. But anyway, he had two ejections and basically was uninjured for both of them. So, there's quite a few people I know who are alive today because of the life-saving benefits that the seat brings. And I always felt comfortable sitting on an ejection seat knowing that if everything went wrong, I could get out of there. When I left the Air Force and went back to flying light civilian aeroplanes again, and I didn't have an ejection seat, I felt nervous. If anything goes wrong, I'm stuck in here. It didn't fill me with a lot of joy. Right, so just before I finish, I want to tell a story about an ejection that I was involved in. This is a Mackie here. It's from the same formation fly pass that I showed you earlier. Number 38 here was the first fast jet I ever flew in. The second time I flew in a fast jet was in this jet, so I had a bit of an affinity for this aeroplane. So this was taken in January of 94. In October of 94, this aircraft was involved in a mid-air collision with another one. Now, I was the doctor on call for the crash response at the time. I remember it being around about morning tea time. I was looking forward to a cup of coffee. I'd made it. I was literally about to drink it and the crash alarm goes off. So into the ambulance, off to where the helicopter is. The helicopter was typically, in this situation, in the hangar. The pilots are sitting on chairs reading newspapers. On this day we get there, the helicopter is out, the rotors are turning and they're waiting for me. It's only taken me a couple of minutes to make that short drive in the ambulance. Anyway, so I knew something was going on. We got airborne and I said, what's going on? And they said, 2 Mackeys have collided and gone down. Now, that was one of my squadrons. I knew all the pilots. This is a terrible, terrible feeling, knowing that you're going out probably to recover 2 dead squadron mates. It's probably one of the worst feelings I've ever had. The mood in the helicopter was very sombre. We didn't know anything more at that point. But fortunately, we got a call from the 3rd aircraft that was involved. It was a 2 versus 1 air combat exercise. So the 2 against the 1 lost, right? If you like. The 3rd aircraft was able to establish radio contact with the 2 guys having ejected. They hit pretty much wingtip to wingtip at a massive closing speed. So they were lucky to get out of that. But we knew at that point that they were alive. They were a little bit injured, yet to be determined at that point, but they were waiting for us to turn up in the helicopter. So the mood lifted in the helicopter, and so it was the worst of days, then it became the best of days, because I was going out to pick up 2 mates. And I remember being winched down from the helicopter to the first one, and he's standing there, having just ejected after a mid-air collision, and he says, "G'day, Doc." Calm as you like, right? They got him in the helicopter, got the other guy, and it was probably one of the most rewarding professional things I've done as an AvMed doctor is recover these 2 guys, look after their medical needs, and see them ultimately go back to flying. And I'm still in contact with them today. The anniversary is in October, so every October we have a chat about the time we all shared a helicopter together. So interesting. So just to wrap up then, the Fast Jet Aviation Medicine environment is unique. It's been a great privilege for me to have been involved in this for a long time and to have flown these aeroplanes and flown with some of the best pilots I've ever seen. All very humble but incredibly professional and competent pilots. Fantastic experience in 4 different types of fast jets. It's a physiologically challenging and demanding environment. It's very dynamic. Things change rapidly. Air combat manoeuvring is incredibly intense and dynamic. There have been some significant historical contributions, which I've tried to highlight a couple of times, to better protecting fast jet aircrew from that demanding, dynamic and high-risk environment. And of course, the need for fast jet aviation medicine support remains. They're the tip of the spear in many respects, and particularly now in the current period of geopolitical tension. And they can only get their job done if the AvMed doctors are supporting them to get that job done safely. So if you have the opportunity to get involved in this sort of flying and support to these guys, I'd recommend it. It's been the professional privilege of my life. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you.
David, massive thanks for a hugely interesting and insightful talk. I think loads to reflect on there. If I can just pick on 3 just to start with. First one is, haven't we come a long way in 80 years? Massive change. Second is, if there's any of our fast jet aircrews who happen to have been listening to this, if they weren't already 100% convinced they were superhuman, they're probably a little bit close to that now. And thirdly, whilst I recognise Yeovil is quite a difficult place to get to, I'm absolutely certain there are easier ways to get there than diverting after a bird strike in a fast jet.
I would agree.
Perhaps only marginally, but there still are easier. Massive thank you. Really appreciate you delivering this lecture for us. And Colin, can I ask you to just come up and give David a memento of his lecture?
was one of the best lectures. I've been to more than 50. It's one of the best. Says how bloody old I am. I hope you can hear me at the back there. I'm not going to speak into this thing. All I can say to you, Professor, is that my father never flew much in a fast jet. He was flying things like ferry battles and gladiators and stuff like that. But he was the sole survivor out of a B-17 that crashed in 41. He was the only one to get out of 8. And his colleague, he never, ever spoke to me about that, ever, because all his friends had gone. But his colleagues afterwards told me that that was one of the things that made him want to develop the ejector seat. And that's what he did after that. So I'd just like to present you with this a wonderful lecture. That's a little lapel badge for the Stewart Trust, and many congratulations for such a good lecture.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gents, thanks for coming. That concludes the Stewart Memorial Lecture. There is a drinks reception upstairs, sponsored by Martin Baker. Please join us for a drink and for some further chat. Thank you.